Hi again, Mark here from Talkingbass.net. This week we're going to look at a cool musical way to practice your bass fills that should help with moving around the neck and also help with applying your fills in a practical setting. So the main gist of this practice is pretty much as follows. We're going to take a simple little riff, play it round and round, and then pop some killer fills in there. We want to start easy with the fills and then gradually branch out all over the neck, but we always want to keep track of the time and feel of the riff so we can land back on the one. So first we need a riff. Now I'm going to give you a sample riff to work with, but you can make up your own or use any riff that you know that works with the chord or scale that you want to practice. So here's our riff. I've transcribed all of the material in this lesson, including this riff, in the free download, so be sure to follow the link in the info below, but I will quickly run through this riff anyway. So, we begin D, 5th fret of the A string, hammer on to the E at the 7th fret. Then we have an open E string, then we choke that off on the beat, so we're going to use this hand to choke that off. Then we have A to B on the E string, so 5th fret to 7th fret, and that's a hammer on. So we play the first note, hammer on to the B. Then we've got two ghost notes on the E string. So after you've played the B, you just go into home position, just relax the hand there and play those two ghost notes. Then we're back to the D to E there on the A string, so 5th fret to 7th fret, hammer on. Then we're on the G, 5th fret of the D string, we play that twice, and then back to the E, 7th fret of the A string. Okay, so that's the riff. And as you saw there on the second time round there, I actually played the ghost notes played on the A string. It doesn't matter which string you play the ghost notes on, so. So there I'm playing them on the E string. If you feel like you want to play them on the A string, that's fine too. So this riff is implying an E minor 7 tonality, so we're going to be looking at fills that work around an E minor or E minor 7 arpeggio, an E minor pentatonic scale, or possibly E Dorian, if you want to add the extra 2nd and 6th in there. I've chosen this chord and scale because it's such common ground for most bass players. E minor pentatonic is probably the most overused scale in pop, rock and funk, but remember this practice method can be applied to any chord or scale, so, once you've got it down, be creative. So, we have a riff. Now you want to add some fills in there. So what we'll do is play the riff round 3 times and then add a fill on the 4th bar. So think of it like drums. We have a beat and then a fill to break things up and give us a turnaround back to the start. First, I'll just show you the 2 sample fills and then we'll work through them and I'll show you how you can go about improvising your own all over the neck. So, first of all, let's hear the riff with the 2 fills that we're going to be looking at. 3, 4. Okay, so for the first fill we have the following. So we start by working up an E minor arpeggio. So we have E, G, B. So 12th fret E string, 10th fret A string, 9th fret D string. Then we slide down to the A at the 7th fret of the D string. So that's our little position shift. Then we come down G and the E, 10th fret A string, 7th fret A string. Then we come down to the D, 5th fret of the A string and work up chromatically. So we have D, D sharp, E, 5th fret, 6th fret, 7th fret. Then we work up to the G, 5th fret of the D string. Then down E and the D, 7th fret, 5th fret. You can see I'm having to play through this to try and remember it. What's next? Okay, so down the E and the D, and then B, A, G, 7th fret, 5th fret, 3rd fret on the E string. Okay, so. And that's the first fill. And I'm picking every note there. Okay. So, as I mentioned earlier, these fills are all there transcribed in the lesson material, so just click that link in the info below. So, if we now add that to our riff, you know, and playing it there on the 4th bar, we get the following. 3, 4. Okay, so you want to go round and round on that because you want to get used to coming back into the riff. So after you've finished, you're straight back up to the hammer-on at the D and the E. So we're back into the riff. And this is why this way of practicing is really useful, because instead of just practicing a fill on its own, we're actually having to stay in time and come back into the riff, because that's what you would have to do in a practical application. If you're playing in a band, you're playing away, and then you want to improvise a fill, you might go for that fill, but remember you've got to come back in on the bass line, and that's something that can often catch people out. They think, oh, I'm going to go and play something, and then they think, oops, I've got to get back into the song. So this gets you used to thinking about your entry back into the bass line. For the second fill, we have the following. Okay, so once again we come up the E minor arpeggio. So we've got E, G, B there, 12th fret E string, 10th fret A string, 9th fret D string. Then we have D to E there, slide from the D to the E, 12th fret to 14th fret D string. Then we have G, A, B, so 12th fret, 14th fret, 16th fret on the G string. Then we move up to the D, up at the 19th fret of the G string. Okay, then we come down B, 16th fret of the G string. Then we have A, G, E, so 19th fret, 17th fret on the D string, down to the E at the, what's that, the 19th fret of the A string. Then back up to the G and back down to the E. I always have problems with the fret numbers up at the top because I don't think in terms of fret numbers, I just think of notes, right? So, and that's all of that fill. So you need to work through that slowly and get those position shifts down. So, got that slide there, and then we've got the slide up to the D, and then we just come down there. Okay, so it's working through several positions there. So once you've nailed that fill, you can add it into the riff. So 2, 3, 4. Okay. Once you've nailed both those fills, you can combine them and just start playing them with the riff, okay? So we'll play the riff round 3 times, play fill number 1, riff round 3 times, play fill number 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the basic method for practicing these fills. We're taking a riff, we're playing around it, and then we're just inserting those fills. And you don't have to stick to a 1-bar fill. You could be playing a 2-bar fill or even a 3-bar fill. Or you could try round the riff, 7 times and then add one in on the 8th time. Do whatever you want. And, create your own riff, try different chords, scales, just anything that you want to practice, and then you try applying it within that framework. Now, as I said, learning that riff and those fills is fine, but you really want to start working on creating your own fills and navigating around the fingerboard. So let's have a look at what's going on in those fills. Now, the first thing that you need to be aware of in seeing a chord or scale all over the fingerboard is that you don't really have to worry about seeing the entire neck as this huge expanse of notes. That can be one of the most intimidating aspects of learning to play bass. When someone says, see the scale all over the neck, you tend to just visualize one of those giant guitar fretboard diagrams covered in notes and circles. Don't worry about seeing it all at the same time. Concentrate on breaking it up into smaller positions. So, like I said earlier, we're pretty much working in an E-7 tonality, so we're looking to learn the notes of the E-7 chord as arpeggios. Now, I've got lots of lessons devoted to learning arpeggios and the positions on YouTube, and if you really want to get into this, my Chord Tone Essentials course over at Talkingbass is the ultimate deep dive into all of this. So I'll only brush over this part of the lesson for the sake of time. I'll link to the other lessons in the info below. Basically, in condensing a lot of this information, I can give you 3 simple tips that'll help you get around the neck more easily. Number 1, remember the neck repeats at the 12th fret. So the 12th fret is a repeat of the open string. So all of the fret markers that you see down here correspond to these fret markers up here. So if I see a C here at the 3rd fret of the A string, you see that fret marker there? It's the same as this fret marker here. This fret marker, the D, that's a D. E, E, okay? So it's exactly the same. So in learning the neck, we only actually have to learn half of it. We only learn from the open string to the 12th fret because then it's just a repeat of all that information. So if I learn, let's say, an E-7 arpeggio, okay, if I play that pattern, starting on that E there, I can just play the exact same thing an octave higher up here. Okay? Tip number 2, any note that we look at is repeated on the adjacent string further up the neck. And this is really handy because it gives us an alternating pattern between, let's say, the E and the A string for our root notes. So if we take an E as an example, we have the open E string, but then if we want to find the next E as we move up, there's another E here on the A string. As we move up, we get to the 7th fret. So we're alternating from the E string to the A string and then back. So we have E, then the 7th fret for the E on the A string, and then we move further up on the E string, we find the 12th fret there. Then we keep moving, there'll be another one on the A string. So we get this one here at the 19th fret. So that pattern is obviously just a repeat of this pattern down here, but it means that we have this alternating pattern moving between the E and the A string for our lowest root note there. So E, 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 and then I come back to the E there on the E string again at the 24th fret, if you've got that many frets. The same would go for any note. So if I was on a C, the 3rd fret of the A string, I want the next C as I move up, the next root note up here. So I just move on to the E string, and here we have one at the 8th fret. Then I carry on moving up, the next one's going to be on the A string, and I've got one here at the 15th fret, and then we carry on up, and I've got the C up here. It just alternates. D, 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 D. Whichever note, you can just alternate between them on the E and the A string. Now, this is really useful because it gives us a simple method for just shifting a single pattern up and down the neck based on the root note. So if I'm playing around on an E-7 and I have that E-7 arpeggio, I can play it here at the 7th fret, starting at the 7th fret of the A string, but then think about this kind of alternating pattern we have. I can take it here and play it at the 12th fret. And then shift up again onto the A string. Okay, down again. Down to the 7th fret. And down to the open string. Okay, so that single pattern that we've got there, I've moved it into several different places on the neck. Okay, so we're gradually starting to move around on the fingerboard. So even if you're just stuck down here, and you want to jump up and, play something a little higher, we know we've got this E here. We can just shift up there, okay? So now onto the third tip, and this one's a good one. So for any scale or arpeggio that we have 3 separate patterns starting on any root note, and I've covered this many, many times on YouTube, so many of you out there will know what I'm talking about here. But if I take an E minor 7, okay, so the common one that we would have would be this one. So we start at the 7th fret there. So we've got E, G, B, D, okay? And then we can repeat the E at the top there. So that's 7th fret, 10th fret on the A string, 9th fret on the D string, 7th fret on the G string, and then 9th fret on the G string. So that's a very, very common pattern for an E minor 7, let's say. And so we're using the fingering, 1st finger, 4th finger, 3rd finger, 1st finger, and then 3rd or 4th finger. But we've got another 2 patterns that we can use starting from that 7th fret, and this is all based on which finger we start on. So another pattern might be starting on the 2nd finger or 3rd finger. You can use either. So we've got the 2nd finger there for the E, then we take the G here at the 5th fret of the D string instead of this one here at the 10th fret. And then we play the same B there, 9th fret of the D string, and then the same D and the E up at the top. So we have this pattern. Okay, so all we've done is taken that G there at the 10th fret and shifted it down to the 5th fret, but it gives us a different fingering pattern, and we're starting to add a little bit more real estate on the neck. So we're in this position, then we start in this position, and then finally we've got one starting on the 4th finger. So if we start there on the 4th finger for that E there, 7th fret of the A string, we then play the G at the 5th fret of the D string, so just as we did in the previous one, but then we play the B there at the 4th fret of the G string, which then leaves us with the D there at the 7th fret of the G string to be played with the 4th finger. So this is the 4th finger pattern. Now in this position we can't actually get up to the high E there, the octave, but don't worry about that. You could just shift up and then come back down, but don't worry about that too much. This is all about positioning. So we have 1st finger, 2nd finger, and 4th finger. Okay? So think about what we have now. We have our repetition of the root note alternating between the E and the A string. So for an E, we have E, 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 E. And then we have 3 separate patterns for that E minor 7 arpeggio. So 1st finger, 2nd finger, and 4th finger. Okay, so we can now play those 3 patterns on each of these root notes. So now we move to the 12th fret of the E string. I can even catch that E there up at the top as I come up on the 4th finger. Or I could play it up here. Or I could play down at the open string. Now if I'm on the open string, I can only really play that 1st finger pattern, which I'm actually not using the 1st finger for because it's the open string, but it's that same shape. Okay, so that gives us a lot more real estate because, as you can see, if we're playing on this 1st finger pattern here, the next shift up would actually take us to this 12th fret of the E string. They're very close by. So as I'm moving up, okay, I can easily shift between those patterns, and you want to learn each of those patterns very well. You really want to get used to maybe the 4th finger pattern, because if you're on the 1st finger pattern, it's not too much of a shift to move up to that one. So it's a great doorway for getting up here, okay? So we're progressively moving between each position. Now there's still a few more patterns to fill in, but we're getting there. So once you have those arpeggio patterns over a single octave, you can start to expand within those areas. So if I'm on this E minor 7 here on the 1st finger, I can add the notes below. So if I'm on the 2nd finger and the 4th finger. Okay, so I've got several different notes below. Same up here if I'm on this 12th fret. I can expand above, I can play the E and the G up at the top, and the 7th below. Then same thing down here, I've got the D below. I've got the G up at the top. And then the first finger. Okay, so I'm just expanding and adding the remaining notes for that arpeggio in each position, which means that we have all of the notes in any one position. We have all of the notes of the arpeggio, and we're starting to move it around the neck. As well as the root notes on the E and the A string, there is one additional pattern that's worth using in there, and that's with the root notes starting on the D string, so the first finger there, which when we start at the bottom, we're actually looking at the third there. So we're starting on the third of the chord. So this is actually a first inversion arpeggio, okay? So for that E minor 7, I've got the E there, the G and the B. So this is the first finger pattern, but starting on the D string, and then we just add the rest of the notes below, the D, the B, and the G, okay? So to start from the lowest note up, we start at the G, and then come back down, okay? Now, obviously, that's all a lot of information to take in such a short space of time. So I'm not expecting all of that to just, be digested immediately. But like I said, I've covered all of this in depth in other YouTube videos that I'm linking below, and I go into this in real detail in the Chord Tone Essentials course. So check that out if you want to get really into this through every single chord, every single non-chord tone, everything, all over the neck. That's all in there. So, this is just a little primer just to show you what's available to you and how you can start to move all over the fingerboard without seeing every single note all the time. That's not what people are looking at. They're focusing on one area that they're actually in. You don't have people looking at the neck and just seeing all of the notes, because at any one point you are focusing on the area that you're playing in, okay? As you start to shift, yes, you need to know what all the notes are all over the neck, but at any one time you will be focusing on the area that you're actually playing in. So in terms of the E minor 7 there, yes, we have the arpeggio, but we can add some other notes in there. So if you add the fourth in there, we get the minor pentatonic. So that's an E minor pentatonic, which again, you could do all over the neck, in each of those positions. Then we also could add the second and the sixth, which would give us the Dorian scale. Okay, so that would give us a Dorian. Or we could add some chromatic notes in there. So, that gives us a blues scale. We can put chromatic notes between any of those chord tones, but this is all the study of chord tones and harmony and improvisation. And like I said, this is all in the Chord Tone Essentials course, so I talk about non-chord tones, including chromatics. So once you've practiced all these arpeggios and all these notes, and you can, play around in each of these positions, you need to start looking at how you can move between them. And this is where the fills come in that I showed you earlier, because they're great examples of moving between these positions. And to do this, you have to think, obviously, of position shifts. And to do that, it's worth looking at doorways. Now, when I say a doorway, I just mean you pick a note from that arpeggio, and then you shift down another note into the next position. So let's have a look at the beginning of the first fill that we played. At the start of that fill, I came up the fourth finger E minor 7. Okay? Then I shifted down. That's my doorway. I shifted down one note there, which is actually to the fourth, so we're actually using a minor pentatonic there. I came down, and hey presto, I'm in this first finger position here. So I've shifted position. So in the fill, we continue to move, but I could just think of that as a doorway that I might use in whichever fills that I come up with in the future. So, okay, so there's that doorway. So it's worth practicing that doorway, for a while until it becomes instinctive. You don't want to be thinking all the time when you're doing this. It just wants to flow out of you. So, if I'm on this position, in this position, I can then think, okay, I have my position shift there, and I'm free to move into this next area. So then, when we move down in the fill, I instantly then, after coming down to the E, I shift down again. So I've used that E as the doorway down to the D, and then I've come up chromatically, but we're basically in this fourth finger pattern for the E minor 7 there, starting at the 7th fret. So I'm now in this position. So I've moved through 3 separate positions there, all within the space of a few notes. And then when I get down to that G, yeah, I'm kind of in this same position here, but you know, I'm actually then down in this first inversion. But don't worry about the names of it and you know all of that stuff. We're basically just shifting little, you know, through the patterns as I work down. So that's that fill. It's a great example of how we can shift through those positions, and that's what you want to be looking at, these little doorways. You want to practice one doorway until it feels natural. For the second fill, we move up. So again, we're using doorways. So I come up through that 4th finger pattern again, exactly the same start, get up to the 7th, and then I shift up 1 note up to the octave E there. So there's my doorway. I use the D there as the doorway to shift up into the next position. So I'm now in the 2nd finger position. It's only 1 move there. And then I just shift up, and by now I'm actually in the 1st finger position, but an octave higher. So then again I shift up to the D. That's my doorway from the B there up to the D. And by doing that, I've actually landed in the 4th finger position up here at the 19th fret. So again, I've shifted through quite a few positions in a very short space. Okay, so again, it's using doorways. So hopefully that should give you some food for thought in terms of understanding how you can break the neck down into more manageable chunks of information. Nobody is looking at the whole of the neck all of the time. You focus in the area that you're in or the area that you're moving to. Yes, you need to know what notes are available all over the neck, but some of these huge fretboard diagrams covering the whole fretboard can be intimidating and ultimately useless because you want to be focusing in the area that you're in. So remember, if you want to understand a lot more about the topics that I've covered today, just check out the links in the info below, and certainly check out the Chord Tone Essentials course over at talkingbass.net. I've only skated over a few details here, and there's a whole sea of material to practice in that course. So go check it out, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next week.